Okay, so I have been wanting to do this video for such a long time. I am so excited to show you guys some of Springfield history. We're actually going to do it at the History Museum on the Square, which is right behind me. We'll go ahead and check it out. So let's go. Hey, my name is Faith Dornak. I am the video coordinator for Wiser Living, and today we're gonna talk about the history of Springfield, Missouri. Today I'm gonna get into some pretty interesting stuff and related to a couple different places that you've probably seen or heard if you live around this area. And if you don't live in this area, you'll still probably find it pretty interesting anyway. That way, by doing this, all of this will kind of feel relevant. You're welcome, Springfield. Springfield, Missouri history is absolutely fascinating, and we have a whole museum dedicated to it that we're going to see a little bit of today. It's called the History Museum on the Square, and so many of us are proud of this place. I'm gonna give you a lowdown, showdown, whatever you want to call it. Let's get into it. We're going to begin with the native crossroads, so let's go back to the time of the Indians behind the 1820s when white settlers came into the area. This area that we now know as Springfield was once inhabited by the Kickapoo, the Delaware, and the Osage Indians for thousands of years. And if those names sound familiar, it probably should. A few of those have been recognizable things like Delaware Street, which our office sits on, and of course, Kickapoo High School, which is one of the largest Springfield schools that we have. I tried to find something in Springfield for Osage Indians. I only came up with a little cul-de-sac at the end of a road, so not very much. We have Osage Restaurant in Branson, but Branson is Branson and Springfield is Springfield. So anyways, here you'll see a glimpse of what it would have looked like with their living conditions and some of the tools that they used back in the day. Eventually, these Indians moved westward into other states and ended up getting into areas like Kansas and Oklahoma. Now let's get into some of the pioneers and the founders at the crossroads. Now the one that we know as the founder of Springfield is John Polk Campbell. You'll probably recognize the street in Springfield that's named after him too.
Fun fact, John Campbell, you actually don't have a picture of him, so it's just his wife, which I thought was pretty interesting.
All they can say is maybe this guy is him. Either way, I don't really know how they keep record of all this, but just imagine going down in history mislabeled as the founder of some random city. Honestly, we could just throw anybody in there if we're gonna do that.
I am John Polk Campbell.
They also have a video that talks about some of the founding stories that happened, and there's some pretty cool things in here too.
So, John Polk Campbell was surveying the area when he came across the Kickapoo Indians. They guided him to a tract of land next to a spring, and because he liked this area so much, he carved his initials in a nearby ash tree. Here began the start of the civilization in Springfield, as 13 log cabins were built in 1 year with Campbell's friends and family. And where exactly is this little piece of land, you may ask? It's called Founders Park.
I am here at Founders Park, and this would have been the place that John Polk up here would have carved his initials in the tree. So if you do recognize this place, this is where that land would have been.
Anyway, I would highly recommend going to take a look at this park. Sometimes they have events and the occasional movie shown here, so go check it out. There in the museum, they have many little objects owned by the Campbell family: handkerchiefs, silhouette drawings, mirrors, mourning brooches, many little details of objects that we take for granted today that would have been back then family treasures. Other prevalent founders include glimpses of Martin Hubble, whose grandson Dr. Edwin Hubble became a famous astronomer and created the Hubble telescope, and Nathan Boone, the 10th and final child of Daniel Boone. So you'll probably recognize those. From here, the settlers built their home by the resources that were available to them in Springfield and the surrounding areas. So they built their town around agriculture mostly. You'll actually get to see some of the equipment that was used commonly in their lifestyle back in the day. My favorite part is seeing this map of what Springfield once looked like.
There is this bird's eye view of Springfield from the northwest looking southeast. You can see all of the different churches that they ended up having. Go over this side. It's really interesting, in all the different mills that they had that existed within Springfield.
I know that if you are a third or fourth generation Missourian, sometimes even second generation, more than likely you'll have some roots where your family built their life on a farm. I mean, that was even the case for me. Anyways, I wanted to touch up on the importance of agricultural history before we get into the Civil War. You may or may not know this, but there were not one, not two, but 3 battles that took place around Springfield and the surrounding areas. That's so we can include Republic, which was site for the first major Civil War battle west of the Mississippi River. Yes, you know it's quite a mouthful. It's Wilson's Creek National Battlefield. Now for a little backstory on the state at the time. Missouri was a very divided state when it came to the Civil War. We were a part of what was known as the Missouri Compromise, and we became a slave state so that the North could keep the state of Maine as a free state. Many people supported slavery in the state and many people opposed it in the state. So as you can imagine, tensions were very high and this directly affected Springfield.
So I am at the site of Wilson's Creek National Battlefield, and this is where they had part of the Civil War, where they had to end up having about 2,500 men dying, which is a lot of people if you think about way back then. This is also where General Lyon died, and he was a very famous Union soldier.
This battle took place over the course of around only 5 hours. Nathaniel Lyon was known as to be the first Union general to be killed in the Civil War on that day in August of 1861. It was a very brutal loss for the North. Then we have the First Battle of Springfield. At the time, Springfield forces were controlled by the South. Hearing that it was lightly defended, the North attacked the city with Major Charles Zagonyi leading the charge. They were able to take back Springfield around October of 1861. Now, in the January of 1863, we had the Second Battle of Springfield. At this time, Springfield held the Union Army's military supplies, so Confederate leader General John Marmaduke attempted to take over the city, but after General E. Brown and General C.B. Holland were able to recruit all able-bodied civilians to successfully defend off the attack. After these events, Springfield was able to stay in the hands of the Union for the rest of the war. There's also plenty of things that you can see there that they used in the war. An exploding cannonball fragment, pistols, a drum used for marching, even doctors' tools and instruments, including one being a bone saw, which would have been necessary at the time, obviously, but in that context of how it was used, it seems like an absolute nightmare, so yikes. Now let's move on to the next, trains, trolleys, and transportation, which is the next step to building growth in Springfield. It all began with trains, specifically the Frisco Railway, whose operational center was here in Springfield. Its railroad tracks stretched through many different states, including Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Kansas.
So you'll actually walk inside of this train that you see when you first walk in, and there's an entire little caboose back here where you can play games and stuff like that. It actually has video of, I think the lady said it was in like Wilson's Creek area. They said it was very hard to shoot because they weren't able to find a lot of footage that was just like no markers, no trails, stuff like that.
After that, we got into the trolley, which really surprised me because I was like, we don't have any trolleys in Springfield, but come to find out we had a trolley system in Springfield. I say bring it back. Anybody? No? No? Okay. This one in particular is special because it is a time-traveling trolley, say that 5 times fast, 2 different parts of Springfield's past.
I'll see you on the other side, guys.
I kind of see what they did there. They were time traveling on a trolley, goes through history. Very clever. This part of my journey led me to some of my favorite parts of Springfield history, including Walter L. Majors, who drove the first car in Springfield on the square. They said it was going dangerously fast, and it was only going 7 miles an hour. 7 miles an hour! Slow down, Batman! Anyway, this man opened an auto repair shop and made patents in many devices. He was a very cool man. That's all I'm saying. Also, we hear about another big player on the field, Sempronius Boyd, or Pony Boyd, who was a mayor of Springfield, a lawyer, colonel, congressman, a judge, and a businessman who helped to build up Springfield. Also, look at this man. Wow. He's good looking. How many good looking men do you see in history? Not very many. Good for you, man. Anyway, moving on. This is the man in 1876. He was the first one to call Springfield the Queen City of the Ozarks. He also presided over the trial of Wild Bill Hickok, which we will get to later. You also find out that Springfield was originally 2 different cities, not just Springfield. This was actually north of Springfield. Guess what this city was called? I'll wait. Yes, it was called North Springfield. Built up because of the railroad there, this is what we know as C Street today, and this city existed from 1870 to 1887. These two cities constantly competed against each other to be the dominant business district in the area, separated along Division Street, because it was the dividing line. People and names back then made things so easy, so simple.
Except for ya boy Sempronius.
And here we are, the Great Cobra Scare of 1953. You knew it was coming. This was a big deal back in the day when people started discovering poisonous cobras, which are not native to Springfield, crawling across the city. Many of the kids had to stay indoors, and it launched a massive manhunt where they would go out and look for these snakes. Even at one point, they got snake charmer music going so that they could lure them out. Come to find out, snakes are actually deaf, so it wasn't effective.
So I'm actually at the location where some of the very first snakes were found for the first time. Along these streets is also where Mauer's pet shop would have been, over on St. Louis Street, just the next street over. Today the shop is just an empty EMS lot, so there's not much to see, but this is where all the mayhem happened.
35 years later, they found out it was a boy named Carl Barnett who came forward to say it had been him when he was 14 who let out the snakes at Mauer's pet shop after the owner refused to let him return his dead fish. Man, what a story. How is this relevant to you might ask? Well, you can actually find a beer named after this event at Mother's Brew. Now here's a neat one, the Ozark Jubilee.
So I'm actually on site of where Jewel Theater was, which premiered the show Ozark Jubilee. At the time, this was actually the largest show for country music and even rivaled Nashville at the time.
Now this country actually doesn't sound the same as it used to then. This is like old country music. Kind of sounds like the radio that you would hear in Fallout 4, if you know what I mean. This show premiered on ABC back in 1955 and ended in 1960, so a short but bright flame.
One thing about this place is that I've actually passed by it many times and I still do not know what it was until I actually saw this marker. If you look at this, you'll actually recognize where we're at.
They had a number of really famous people on the show. You would recognize people like Brenda Lee, rockin' around the Christmas tree. Then you got Johnny Cash with the Ring of Fire and Walk the Line. Then you got Patsy Cline with the Crazy. And then you got Elvis. You know, Elvis. Who are you if you don't know Elvis? Everybody knows Elvis. There were a lot of people that impacted Springfield history. You'll get to see a little bit of William Wilder, Charles Lindbergh,
Roosevelt, Reagan, Louis Armstrong, Truman,
even Mr. Kickapoo himself, Brad Pitt, and countless others. And here we are, folks, now at the exhibit for the Wild Bill Hickok in the American West.
What was cool about this guy is that this was one of the very first shootouts of the Old West that was ever recorded in history.
This happened back in 1865, where two men who were once friends had a deadly encounter on the square. Wild Bill had lost his pocket watch while gambling and told Tut not to flash it around town, which resulted in a duel where Tut missed and Wild Bill didn't. After this, Wild Bill Hickok actually became this legendary character.
Now, here you can see St. Louis Street and College Street. Hickok would have been at the back, and he shot down Tut from over here, which courthouse, if you actually look outside the window, it's actually set up to be in that same display. So over here would have been Tut, and then over there, right about there would have been Wild Bill. And that's pretty far distance if you look at it.
You know, I've never actually seen this view of the square before, and it is quite beautiful.
They even have a spot that you can aim for the bullseye inside.
What?
Now for an up-close look, this is where Tut would have been standing here shooting that way, and Wild Bill would have been standing here shooting from the other direction. And yes, there's a tree. It's all that I have to work with, okay? Now for the last, but certainly not the least, we get into the birthplace of Route 66. Now why of all places would Springfield be known as the birthplace of Route 66? Well, I will tell you, it's because of this man right here, John T. Woodruff. Him and Cyrus Avery came up with making the idea of a transcontinental highway, yes, that is a word, or really just one really long road connecting from Chicago to LA. He eventually helped build properties around Springfield that you will probably recognize, just like the Woodruff Building.
Here I am in front of Sky 11. It is a very recognizable spot in Springfield, Missouri. This was once the Woodruff Building, which was considered to be the first skyscraper, quote unquote skyscraper, because it's only 10 stories tall. One really neat article from back in the day depicts that if you look up at the top of the building, your hats were in danger of falling off.
You also have the Sterling Building, which was once known as the Sandstone Hotel. and the Shrine Mosque, which was once known as the largest auditorium on Route 66,
This part of St. Louis Street was actually part of Old Route 66.
which wove around the square and continued along College Street. Here you can see a timeline of the many different events that surrounded Route 66 at the time.
This wall that they have here is actually 66 foot total, which is not a mistake. Very intentional how they set that up. Get it? Route 66, 66 feet.
Many look back on Route 66 and think of not only driving, but neon signs, good music, and even some really good food. I'm actually thinking of diners. One in particular is America's first drive-thru, started here in Springfield. They had an awesome commercial for Red's Giant Hamburg. Check this out. Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed getting to know some of Springfield's most fascinating history. I'm going to be linking certain sources, other articles, and even videos of things that I thought were pretty interesting. So if you love history, you'll love this. Go check it out. Hey, if you like this, give us a like, subscribe for more content. Just tell me what you think down below. I want to know, so go do it. Have a good one. Stay safe out there, guys. Adios. Whoa. Did you see this guy?